Good evening, everybody. I welcome all of you in today's ethics session of Focus Weekly. Here we shall take up some newspaper articles from last week and discuss them from ethics perspective, making it relevant to our GS paper 4 of ethics, integrity and aptitude. The first article that we shall start with concerns the death of mining workers because of the rat hole mining technique, which is still adopted despite being a banned technique in many parts of our country, including Assam and Meghalaya. To analyze the issue, we shall go quite the same way as we have been doing it last week. Last week, we discussed important issues from ethical perspective, and we learned to answer the question, what are the ethical issues, as they like to ask in the question paper. This is one question that you have to answer at least 4 times the year you will write mains, to analyze the case or to write the ethical issues. Last time, I gave you the idea of identifying the ethical issues from the perspective of normative ethics. We have some norms regarding rights, virtues, duties, justice, capability, or common good approach, or sarvodaya, and outcome orientation, or utilitarianism. And logically, they move in this direction, in this order. Virtuous individuals are needed for a duty-based system. Duties inform the social contract, enhances enforcement of laws, protect the rights of the citizens. And these contracts, they shape large institutions which are responsible for last mile delivery. They are responsible for giving individuals their due. And according to John Rawls, these large institutions, they are the basis of justice delivery in modern times. And working of these institutions enable capabilities in individual, giving health, giving education, vocational training, access to resources, access to information, that develops the overall capability. And according to Amartya Sen, it is the capability that lead to the final outcome. And utilitarians and consequentialists, they would like to evaluate the outcome, like the hedonistic calculus of Bentham, or the performance evaluation that we do, or any indices, any report that evaluates how the scheme has done. That is measuring the outcome. Outcome is the final thing. According to Aristotle, it's all began in virtues. According to Aristotle, moral behavior comes about as a result of moral habit. It comes from settled moral character. So to evaluate any case, any question, any issue from the perspective of ethics, we require these dimensions and largely in this order. So we'll try to apply this framework, building on what we have learned last week, to analyze the ethical issue in rat hole mining. These are broad Western philosophers that we can have for virtue or duty and each category. All the ancient philosophers, whether Indian philosophers or Western philosophers, they all were focused largely in internal human sensibilities. We call it virtue or we call it duty, but these are internal to a man. Whether that's Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, or Epicurus, or Zeno of Stoicism, or Indian philosophy, the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, the Three Jewels of Jainism, or Vedantic philosophy, they all are focused mostly on virtues and duties. The idea of social contract, as came in Western philosophy by Thomas Hobbes, then improved by John Locke, further improved by Rousseau. In Indian context, Dr. Ambedkar can be the contractarian. There are philosophers and their ideas that gradually I will spell out. If you have memory from last week, you will recall that we have done much of them in analyzing the issue, but as we gradually flow in our idea, we'll pick up on many of the issues from these categories to analyze the ethical issue in rat hole mining. If we look from the point of view of virtue, it is incumbent on us to express virtue. According to Aristotle, the purpose of life is to acquire distinct virtues and express them to the fullest. In other words, self-actualization, becoming the best version of ourselves, vividly expressing our nature, which is inherently good, moral, rational. That is the purpose of life. And hence, we should be expressing our virtues. We can talk of virtues from various perspectives. I'm taking some Indian philosophy for virtue approach. We can take, in syllabus, you have thinkers and philosophers from India and the world. So when you write answer, you should have a mix of both Indian philosophy and Western philosophy. If you go by Buddhist ethics, violation of ahimsa, non-violence, which is the fundamental tenet of Buddhist philosophy, reducing dukkha or suffering in the eightfold path, which you have to memorize because it can be used in 8 different contexts. One of the in the eightfold path, one of the path is right livelihood. And if we have any source of income, we have to see in the process, we are not creating more suffering in the world, dukkha, to the environment, indirectly to the people, or to the employees, in this case, the rat hole miners. And if you're causing suffering and dukkha and creating livelihood, in case of the corporates, the mine owners, that is violation of the Buddhist ethics. If you look from the principle of Swami Vivekananda, the idea of human dignity should not be violated. Practical Vedanta. He did talk about implementation of ethics, but in a way which is prudent. And environmental degradation and threat to human life is not a prudent way to apply ethics. He talked about social service. Service to man is service to God. You know the famous quote of Swamiji. And the idea of service is to take care, is to become a trustee, is to protect the employees and not to put them at risk. That's violation of these virtues. If we talk about Rabindranath Tagore's humanism, he said that there shouldn't be destruction of harmony between man and nature. Again, human dignity is a universal idea. And failure of society's moral conscience, protection of social conscience is at the heart of humanism of Rabindranath Tagore. And if human life is being lost in practices like this, the social consciousness must take opportunity in form of leadership and movements, etc., protest, dissent, to stop the practice. Social consciousness of society, society's moral consciousness, must not allow the people to be quiet on important moral issues. So you have to show courage. You have to talk. These are suppression of the virtues if the practice which has been banned continues. So there are many things. Actually, in the exam, in the answer, pick one from the entire thing that we have discussed. Similarly, one from each areas, and you'll write 6 ethical issues, and that will be good enough. But for you to have content and dimensions, I'm giving you more ideas. From virtue, when you get committed to your virtue, when you get committed to the principles, and that commitment to the virtue or principle is called as dutifulness, duty. And the most important propounder of duty in Western philosophy is Immanuel Kant, which is quite the same as the principle of dharma in Bhagavad Gita. Violation of the second categorical imperative of Kant that we did last week, you will recall. There are 3 categorical imperatives of Kant, and the second categorical imperative, the most famous of all, is treat humanity as an end, never merely as means. To treat human beings as means is to use them as an instrument to advance your own interest, to advance your own profit, to act in a way of profiteering from others, using them as an instrument for your goal. That is to treat them as means. To treat humanity as an end means that you respect them. And the highest form of respect is to protect human life, right to life and dignity. To maintain that of a human being is to treat human being as an end, to give them meaningful employment, to give them social security, to give them protective gears when they go into the mines. And in any ways, rat hole mining, which put them at risk, should not be allowed. You can have open cast mining. And open cast mining, that too with protective gears, that would be to treat the mining workers as an end. It is the highest duty of a man. In the idea of deontology, in Indian and Western philosophy both, to treat another fellow human being with respect. It is the highest duty. So if that is not happening and you're seeking profit through them, using them as means, that is violation of the duty-based ethics. So we can create ethical issue in the case of right hole mining from these two perspectives, virtue, duty. Moving on from duty, we can move to the next stage of moral development. When people are conscious of their virtues and they are committed to their duty, then they can come under a common contract so that institutionally law can be enforced and institutionally the rights of everyone can be protected. So the social contract is closely aligned with the philosophy of rule of law, as we did last week, and also with the idea of protection of rights of people. The social contract, we can talk from the point of view of the contract of Rousseau. And the idea in the Rousseauian contract is what the contract will be that people will decide. And executive action has to take consent of the people. And that famously is called as the general will. So whether environmental degradation has to happen or not, and what kind of mining activities is permissible, that collectively, with people's wisdom, must be decided. And if something is not from the people's wisdom, that necessarily must stop. The sovereignty must lie in the hand of people. That is the idea of general will. And with this contract, we can actually have the protection of the rights of people. In the idea of dharma, which is linked with the idea of duty, but dharma are standards for cosmic order. And we all have to be committed to dharma for cosmic balance. That's the idea of dharma in Bhagavad Gita. So the idea of dharma, which is has to be, everybody has their duties and everybody, it's a broad principle. So there could be dharma of the king as well, as in the idea of Raj Dharma. There could be dharma of the state. And the highest dharma of the state, as is mentioned in Kautilya's Raj Dharma, is to protect people's life. That's the highest duty of the sovereign under any kind of contract. So if the workplace, if the mining activity inherently put the worker's life at risk, that necessarily need to be stopped from any idea of social contract. Dr. Ambedkar is considered to be in Indian thought to the school of thought of social contract. Dr. Ambedkar wanted the presence of the state for the rights to be protected. Failure of state protection, this is against the fundamental tenet of contract theory and also the idea of Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. Ambedkar, unlike Mahatma Gandhi, wanted the presence of the state in all walks of life so that the rights of the citizens can be better protected. And if a state is showing negligence, that's sheer violation of the contract by the state. The idea was so far that you had virtue and duty and you had arrangements, and that arrangement must fulfill justice. Justice in a simplistic way is giving people their due. This short, sweet definition has been given to us by Aristotle. Giving people their due. People mean all, everybody, all people. Everyone must get their due. And to give due to everybody, you understand intrinsically there's going to be problem because there will always be conflict among the claims of people, and it will always be challenging to give due to all. For example, for large population, to give employment to everyone and to give electricity to everyone, to give a decent standard of life to everyone, to increase HDI, you require resource, and for require resource, there has to be mining. And mining intrinsically put the workers at risk. So to manage the risk of the workers on one hand, and to provide resources to society overall on the other hand, will always be a challenge, and there would be conflict in these two goals. And to resolve the conflict is the idea of justice. When we synthesize the goals, when we resolve seemingly conflicting standards in governance, that idea is called as justice. Justice comes from the root word jus, and J-U-S, jus. And jus means to synthesize. If we can synthesize two seemingly conflicting standards, then that is the only possibility of fulfilling the due to all, giving justice to all. And there are many theories of justice. Last week, you recall, I have given you some ideas of justice. This time around, I am going to take John Rawls once again, his idea of procedural justice. his idea of institutional fairness. And in his idea, if the large institutions, they work fairly, then the justice to the people can be given in modern times. And there are many ideas within the institutional fairness of John Rawls, but one you will recall from last week, violation of difference principle is happening in the case of the rat hole mining. The idea of difference principle of John Rawls is that state is allowed to take give special privilege. State is allowed to take affirmative action for the least well-off. And the mining workers, most surely, they belong to the category of least well-off in society. The least well-off must be taken care, like progressive taxation system. For people who are very, very poor, they're not to be paid any, they're allowed to not pay any tax. They do not have to pay any tax. But the rich are taxed more. The corporate tax 30%. And resource mobilization and redistribution is done by the state to give resources from the rich to the poor. Least well-off must be taken care of. That is one important principle in the theory of justice. The same idea is of Gandhi's Sarvodaya through Antodaya. Development of all through the development of the last one. Same idea is of unto the last. Same is the idea of Gandhi's talisman. To go to the last person. And in his consideration, you take the decision. Difference principle gets violated and the theory of justice is toppled in the implementation working of the state. If the least well-off, they start to suffer more. According to John Rawls, in this case, there will be lack of fair institutional protections, lack of basic equal liberty. The liberty principle of John Rawls will also be violated because the life of the workers, they are not taken care of. They're not given proper protective gears. They're not protected from carbon monoxide in the mines, and their life is at heavy risk. In absence of those, both the liberty principle, the difference principle, the fairness principle of theory of justices will get violated. And that creates an ethical issue as to how our contract is getting implemented by the institutions, by the policies, by the legislation, by the law enforcement, which actually decides the last mile delivery of justice, not the constitution. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel also had the opinion, more than a good constitution, we require working administration, which is the same idea of John Rawls. More than the contract, more than assigning the rights, it's important of securing the rights. And that happens through working of the institutions. So there would be problem at this stage as well. Beyond institution, Amartya Sen has talked about of capability. People will be able to come and take the opportunity provided by the institutions if they have inherent capabilities. And capability has a very broad idea under Amartya Sen. And anything that removes the unfreedom, anything that removes the systematic deprivations, disadvantages, like poverty, like small landholding, like dependence on monsoon, like lack of access to credit, lack of access to market, lack of skill, lack of education, they all are unfreedom. And economic unfreedom is one of the form of unfreedom that is forcing hazardous choices among the workers. It is lack of capability among the workers that they do not have the freedom of choice. They can't choose a way of life. They are forced to adopt this hazardous way of life. So individual capability by the state must be enhanced so that workers have choices. And so that the mining operators, they have to improve the working condition for others to choose this way of life. So the problem is at the level of capability as well. In capability, we can talk of Gandhi's Sarvodaya as well. Violation of Sarvodaya, welfare of all, or violation of trusteeship principle. Gandhiji has said that the rich and the corporates, they must act as a trustee of the workers and the laborers. Trustee means one who is in charge of the care, is a caregiver, is a protector of others. In our whatever capacity we can, every individual must act as a trustee of others in the Gandhian ethics. So it's not happening. It's not happening from the point of view of the mine operators. They're not acting as a trustee. They're not taking care. They're rather using them as means. Now, the last leg in the thought of philosophy, outcome. There are many things that we can talk at the level of outcome. And the most important philosophy that concerns itself with the outcome is utilitarianism. There are many statements of utilitarianism. Last week, I gave you the statement of Bentham, greatest happiness for the greatest number. Alternatively, there's another statement of Bentham's utilitarianism, maximization of happiness and minimization of pain. People forget that there are two legs in Bentham's utilitarianism. Maximization of happiness. When the coal comes out or the resources comes out, then the whole society benefits because of it. And that leads to maximization, no doubt. But there's a second leg in philosophy. Maximization of happiness or pleasure, minimization of pain or suffering. That's also there. For example, land acquisition. Land acquisition act was amended in 2013 to make, and the title, if you read the Land Acquisition Act as it reads now, it's land acquisition, transparency, fair compensation, rehabilitation, resettlement. It's all there. Land acquisition, if you do, people have to move out. Too bad for them. But projects will come on the land that has been acquired by the government, and that will lead to the welfare, overall welfare of whole of society. That will lead to maximization of welfare. But the sovereign authority needs to work on the second leg of utilitarianism as well. At the same time, they must minimize the harm. So fair compensation, transparency in decision-making, rehabilitation of those who have been moved out, resettlement in the new area, that will minimize the pain. So if you have to, then you must do the mining, but do it in a way that doesn't jeopardizes the life of the workers. Give them protective gears. Don't go for a right hole mining, go for open cast mining. Maximize the welfare, but also minimize the pain. And to make it more strong, the Bentham of utilitarianism added some moral rules to make really the statement of Bentham apply and work so that both the legs are worked together. And his utilitarianism is called as rule utilitarianism, where some moral rules are added. And the highest of the rule is to not violate the rights of the working class, maintain their dignity. So it is against Bentham utilitarianism as well, not to minimize they are not minimizing the pain. It is against Mill's utilitarianism as well, of protecting human life, providing good working conditions, security to the worker class, among other ad hoc rules that Mill gave. That is one of the important rule in Mill's utilitarianism. It's violation of that moral rule. So it is against the outcome as well. If you look at other outcome, the pollution, it's also very high. So if we see from any perspective, as I have shown you earlier, from virtue or duty or contract, rule of law, rights, or institutional fairness, procedural fairness, liberty principle, or defense principle of John Rawls, or Amartya Sen capability approach, or Gandhi's utilitarianism, Sarvodaya, or Bentham's utilitarianism, or Mill's utilitarianism, you'll have issues from each one of them. And this should be a thought process. To think on any issue, you must think from head to tail, from virtue till the outcome, whatever is in between. That will develop the ethical issues. So we have analyzed the problem in the rat hole mining. Now we have to look at the solution. What could be the solution? Solution to the problem. In all case studies, you have to analyze the case and give the solution. Analyze, give the options, write their merits and demerits, write the ethical issues. They all are analysis. A solution is to choose the option. Solution is to give the course of action. Solution is to recommend policy. In various ways, in the case studies, they will ask you solutions. Sometimes they'll ask you the policies. Sometimes they'll ask you the options and which option is the best and why. Sometimes they'll ask you the course of action. But largely, if you really know what to do, you can handle any form of question with regard to solution. Solutions in our paper must come from the title of the paper. And the title of the paper is Ethics, Integrity, and Aptitude. Ethics are basically standards. Ethics are principle. To have ethics is to set the standards. Bring in principles that everybody should subscribe to and everybody must follow, inculcate it, develop it among people as part of their character, as part of institutional character, as part of your work culture, as part of societal culture, as part of your constitution, as part of your judicial norms. So that is ethics. Ethics is to have standards. Once you have standards, you have to enforce it. And enforcement of standard is integrity. Integrity is maintaining consistency with regard to your standard. It shouldn't be the case that sometimes you follow, sometimes you don't follow. You can't pick and choose. Once the standards are set, it must be given effect to always, even in adversity, even when there are notional losses, even in difficult times, and that aspect is integrity. So if you talk of from point of view of any policy, the policy must have the right standards, protecting the rights of people and ensuring the welfare of the society. Those standards must come in the policy. Once those standards are set, any law or any policy must have mechanism to give effect to those standards, to check the irregularities, to identify the gaps, have a feedback mechanism to improve the standards further if need be. Those will be the elements of integrity. And then elements of aptitude to be able to give effect to ethics effectively. Whatever the gaps integrity has identified, whatever is the difficulty in maintaining the consistency, you can overcome that through your sensitivity, through your reasoning, through your imagination, innovation, creativity, through your leadership, persuasion, communication, techniques, abilities. Those are aptitudes. So when you recommend any policy or you suggest a course of action, you have to take care of the three elements of ethics, integrity, and aptitude. So if the question be, what kind of policy should we have regarding mining? Then the answer would go something like this. First of all, there should be standard. And standards could include these things. Sustainable mining practices only. You can have open cast mining maybe, but not rat hole mining. Sustainable mining practices, upholding human dignity, ensuring worker safety, following environmental protection norms, implementing fair labor practices, maintaining transparency in operation, ensuring equitable resource distribution. These are various standards with regard to various normative ethics, rights and utilitarianism and justice and duty and this and that. Having all the normative ethics will develop your standards. Once you have developed these standards, it will be meaningless if it is not given effect to. So ethics without integrity will be very weak. You also have to simultaneously develop the tools of integrity. Tools of integrity could be things that can maintain the consistency. So that could involve, in our context of this policy-making, regulatory framework and monitoring mechanism. For example, strict licensing system, regular safety audits, environmental impact assessments, labor rights protection mechanism, grievance redressal system that will put regulation on the laws. Your syllabus has laws, rules, regulation as a source of ethical guidance. These three come together, laws, rules, regulation. Ethics can be seen as laws, then there has to be regulation, different rules for those laws. Apart from that, what will also ensure consistent application of ethics are monitoring mechanisms. Monitoring mechanisms like technology-based surveillance, independent oversight committees, community monitoring system, or regular compliance reporting, transparent documentation. These can ensure that violation does not take place, or if it does, then it can be identified, it can be reported, so that some action can be taken and then the ethics failure can be checked. That is integrity. This is integrity with regard to administration that ensures the consistent application of ethics. Now, the third element, which is quintessential, ethics and integrity are basically nurtured by aptitude. They are protected, they are groomed, and aptitude is the last piece of puzzle in any law implementation or any policy formulation. Aptitude involves many things, like moral sensitivity. That's also an aptitude. The more sensitive you become, the more emotional inculcation you will have, the more motivation you will have for the implementation, and integrity will improve. The more sensitive you become, the more perception of the problem of others will be clear to you. You can perceive the problems and sufferings of others. And hence you will improve the standards. Ethics will improve. So each one of them, aptitude in general, they nurture ethics and integrity. So moral sensitivity is required, like understanding workers' vulnerabilities, environmental consciousness, community impact awareness, cultural sensitivity, sensitivity to people, sensitivity to surrounding. That is fundamental thing. This is not ethics or integrity. This is aptitude. This is our internal faculty that will help us to improve the standards and imbibe it and be committed to it and give effect to it. Meaning have ethics and integrity. If we have sensitivity or if we have any kind of aptitude, whether sensitivity or reasoning, balancing economic need with safety, that is reasoning. That will be reasoning will lead to this balance, but reasoning has to be on both the fronts so that you really move towards sustainability thinking, ethical decision-making framework. Ethical decision-making framework will be part of reasoning or wisdom when you decide from a set of parameters, not just from utilitarianism, but also from rights approach, also from virtue approach, also from contract approach, rule of law, also from duty approach. When you think from all set of normative ethics, that's a framework. Ethical decision making using a framework that will be part of reasoning. And if you are able to do these, then we'll be able to better implement ethics and maintain integrity. Similarly, leadership, bringing others on the moral path through your own proactive approach, the stakeholder engagement, innovation in safety measures, crisis response capability. Developing capability in yourself and inculcating capability in others. That is leadership. This develops work culture. This sets the tone and tenor of the organization. This gives a direction, a vision. Leaders act like lighthouse to give direction to others. And when that is the case, an organization has leadership, then there's a standard set by the organization that is given effect to by the moral force of everybody coming on the moral path. Leaders develop moral coherence by bringing others on the moral path. And with that moral coherence, the standards of ethics are given effect to with stronger force. That improves ethics and that improves integrity. Any organization that you will see has worked because of leadership, whether ISRO or Supreme Court or Election Commission of India, they all have seen good leaders. And that is one of the ways in which ethics and integrity can be nurtured and implemented. It also requires wisdom. Wisdom is to choose the most moral course of action. It's to really have a course of action, a plan of action on board of all the knowledge and all the reasoning and all the sensitivity and all the experience. You now really know this is what is to be done. That is wisdom. Wisdom is to choose the most moral course of action among all the cognition and all the affection. Wisdom, according to Aristotle, is the highest virtue. Having a phased transition plan that could be part of wisdom, alternative livelihood development, skill development programs, community participation, resource optimization, so that we can use the resources optimally with minimal mining activities. And in the same time, we can expedite our transition to clean energy. But it should not be abrupt. It should not be sudden. You have to smoothen things up. So that is to choose the right course of action. That is wisdom. So the policy must work on all the three fronts: ethics, integrity, and aptitude. Only then it's going to work out. Otherwise, without aptitude, ethics and integrity remains weak. So that should be the answer, whether they ask what you will do or what will be the course of action or what policy measure will you recommend. All the answer would be based upon these ideas. That finishes our discussion of the first article. Now let's take a second article. You might have read about this news article from The Hindu, Transforming Mentalities, Redefining Masculinity. Mentalities. This is a UNESCO initiative that aims to shift the way men engage with gender issues, not just as allies, but as active participants in the social transformation. The article discusses various ways in which men must be actively engaged. Not just to protect the rights of the women, but for themselves to become a rational, moral creature. for their own enhancement of their character. And side by side, that will obviously help in protection of the rights of women as well. The article discusses some of the initiatives in India and how they have helped in this discourse of changing, transforming mentalities of men. I would like to show you one of the questions that was asked in 2014 in the question paper. We are witnessing increasing stances of sexual offense against women in the country. Despite existing legal provisions against it, the number of such incidents is on the rise. Suggest some innovative measures to tackle the menace. The question is saying that there are laws in the country. Despite existing legal provisions against it, the number of such incidents is on the rise. The law is not working. So the question was asking, suggest some innovative measures to tackle this menace. The article, if you read, does discusses the innovative measures, which I have put down in the PPT as well. It does discusses those innovative measures, which the question was asking. But before we get on with it, you have to understand that question clearly says, and you'll find many, many questions in GS4 that will show its frustration that external mechanisms, the media and regulations and commissions and RTI and laws, they are simply not working. They're not working because they're external measures. And the idea of this paper is that you require internal sensibilities. You require duties and virtues and character and capability actually for external mechanism to work out. And one of the internal factor that decides the behavior is attitude, which is the second chapter in the syllabus. So I'm going to discuss this whole idea from the point of view of attitude. So this innovative measure should be, when you answer such question, you have to explain that these are external factors. And human behavior, although get affected by external factors, that they are mostly drawn from internal factors. And among many internal factors, one prime factor is attitude, and behavior comes out from attitude. So first you have to explain that to change attitude of men or change attitude of any section, to change behavior of men or to change behavior of any section, you have to first change their attitude. And if they do not have the right attitude, they'll find ways to circumvent the laws. Making laws is not going to suffice till the time we change attitude of people. That is the idea. So you have to relate topics, questions like these that discusses a particular deviant behavior, non-desirable behavior, unacceptable behavior among certain class of people. Behavior comes from attitude. So that becomes immediately the question of attitude. Attitude has three components: cognitive component, affective component, and behavioral component. And actual behavior comes from attitude. Cognitive component includes certain things that I'm going to show you, but it's largely the way we think about the issue. Affective component deals with largely the things, the way we feel about an issue. And this thinking and this feeling gets added up. And once it gets added up, it's stored in the behavioral component that develops the final tendency to act. So for a behavior to be desirable, we should think properly about it, and we should feel properly about it. For example, in the previous discussion of the mining workers, unless you feel anything about the mining workers, you're not going to have tendency to behave in the right way. If you feel their pain, even in parts, if their pain is your pain, and you think about it, you have some thought process of their way of life, you have some thought process of their suffering, you have some thought process regarding their rights, only then you'll have any tendency to work for their welfare. Behavior for the welfare of mining workers going to come out from your attitude, and your attitude is going to develop from your cognition and affection. But suppose I never think about them and I don't feel a thing about them. My cognition and affection are empty with regard to mining workers. So I have no attitude for mining workers. I have no tendency to act in any way towards them. So I will have inaction, and that will cause injustice. So to change behavior, you have to make people think. And there could be many ways in which you make people think. Cognition, if I'm taking the first component of attitude here, thoroughly I will not discuss because it will become very, very lengthy thing. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to discuss the first component of attitude, that is cognitive attitude. And maybe then next time around, we can discuss other things drip by drip. But right now, we are taking up cognition, and cognition for the purpose of this paper, largely we can include 6 things in the cognition: thought, belief, information, knowledge, experience, wisdom. Thought, you understand, is mental activity, and thought process information and experience. The information we hold, the experience that we have, that is processed. We make sense of it when we actually think about it. Belief, our mental conviction, something that we are convinced about. That may be true, that may not be true, but we do not have a conclusive proof for it. So that remains belief. But we are convinced that that is right. And belief actually has bearing as how do we interpret our information and experience. It influences greatly how we interpret. If we do not believe in equality, even if you are getting a stream of information towards you, you'll give a spin off to it and you will interpret it in a very different way. Belief is that fulcrum that allows us to interpret things, and interpretation comes actually to justify our own belief system. It's important actually to have these 2 fundamental things, thought and belief. Man is but the product of his thought. You must have heard this quote of Gandhiji. We become what we think. Everything streams from thought. Thought will develop belief. Belief will decide the interpretation of information and experience. Information that we have, that becomes a basis for the knowledge. Knowledge is not a copy of reality, as they say. Knowledge is the right application of information. Knowledge is to understand the interconnection among all the things that we know, to have coherence among the set of information we have. That is knowledge. To have complete understanding and to complete the process of seeking knowledge, we need experience. Plato said that we can reason within and we can gain knowledge, but Aristotle said that for us to gain knowledge, we need to have observation. We need to have experience. Without experience, knowledge is not completed. And wisdom. Wisdom is to apply the knowledge in the best possible way and to choose a course of action, considering everything, considering the universal aspects of ethics, considering the contextual aspects of ethics, considering the nuances, considering the human nature, considering the consequences, considering all stakeholders. When you decide that this is what I'm going to do, when you have a course of action, that is said to be using wisdom. The course of action comes from everything above and everything around in the other components. When you have the ability to chalk out a course of action with the consideration of all factors, that is called as wisdom. So generally, these 6 things we take in cognition. When I refer to cognition at any point in the course of discussion of other lectures, I'll be referring to these 6 things. It will be good if you familiarize yourself with thought, belief, information, knowledge, experience, and wisdom. And the tendency for action, which is attitude. Attitude is tendency for behavior. Tendency can depend upon the thought process. It can depend upon what information you hold. It can depend upon what experiences you had. If you have seen any traumatic experience of rat hole mining in the past, you as an engineer, you'll have strong tendency to stop it. But you had no experience of people dying around you. You have no experience of ill health. You've never seen such a thing because you're maintaining distance. You have no empathy, no sensitivity. You maintain distance. You have arm distance approach in the operation. You have no experience of it. Then you'll have no tendency actually to remove it. If you have not enough information, if you believe that's all okay, if you believe that it is in the better interest, if you believe that we are going with greater good, and it is believed that is right, greater good approach is right. If you believe that some people are dying, that's okay. If that's your belief, then that belief is going to bring some kind of tendency in you, and you'll be quite okay with rat hole mining. Rather, you'll try to expand the operation of rat hole mining. What belief you hold, that's going to move you in that direction. And that's belief is going to develop by thought. Man is but the product of his thought. As if there's a problem, people we ask the question, ki problem kya hai? Problem. And people say problem soch mein. It's a thought. So if the thought is adulterated, if you do not have the right concepts in the thought, then all of them will not develop in a proper way. And then the behavior is going to be non-desirable, immoral. Thought, Plato has said that concepts are the object of thoughts. And unless we have some concepts, the thought will effectively remain empty. We can have no thoughts actually. We can have no thoughts properly. And if you're dreaming, if you do not have the concept of gravity, you can be flying in your dreams. You can have any thoughts, random thoughts, if you do not work with concept. Thoughts must be filled with concepts according to Plato, concept of justice, concept of rights, concept of fairness, concept of impartiality. You must have that for you to be having right shape of your thought. And there could be many ways. One of the ways to develop right thought using the concept is to keep doing critical thinking. Critical thinking, logical thinking, analysis, reflective equilibrium, going back and forth from principle to the conclusion. That could be part of critical thinking. And if you do this, then only the thoughts improve. You must have heard the famous quote of Descartes, I think, therefore I am. The thinking has the bearing on the entire existence and the entire being of a man. And the quote of Mahatma Gandhi, a man is but the product of his thought. He becomes what he thinks. So this is very important to improve the thought process. And to improve the thought process, you have to develop concepts and disseminate concepts. Educate people on concepts and force people to think on those concepts. Then the thought process can improve. So if you have to improve the behavior of men vis-a-vis violation of rights of females, of women, you have to improve the thoughts. And the topic says mentality. So the article talks about improving the ideas of masculinity among men. And if that's the case, you have to develop that as a thought first, as a concept first, that to be occupied in the thought of the men. And the concept you can develop by redefining power. From power over to power with, power over women to power with women. Power within men and not power over anybody. So redefining the understanding of power, the concept of power for men, strength through partnership, leadership through empathy, authority through respect. This is redefining the essence of power. You can develop this as concepts and propagate it, popularize it for the thought of men to be to be absorbing these concepts, and these concepts becoming the object of thoughts of men. So this is the first thing that needs to be done to change the behavior. Unless society develops concepts, that's not going to occupy the thoughts of people. And behavior ought not to change. The other element is in cognition, belief. And belief is mental conviction. Belief is something that you're convinced of without having a conclusive proof on. So you can't prove it to anybody, but somehow you are convinced that that is right. If you can prove, that's knowledge. But if you can't prove, that is your belief system. And to improve belief system, many things can be done, like examination of our life, as Socrates has said, an unexamined life is not worth living. We all need to examine. Socrates has said that we must question our belief. Our most cherished belief must also pass the falsification test. We should put our belief to falsification test time and again. And these practices can actually lead us to prune our belief out of biasness, out of prejudice, and keep it healthy. Exposure to diversity that challenges our prejudice, that also improves our belief. Any philosophical inquiry, development of scientific temperament will work upon examining our belief. So these are the general practices to improve our belief. And the article mentions about Mardo Wali Baat, a man's thing. This initiative by YP Foundation, it uses storytelling and social media to foster conversations around positive masculinities with young men. The intervention helps young men critically examine the limiting narratives that they have grown up with, empowering them to embrace values of respect and equality. So a conversation can start, and thought-provoking statements or discussion can actually help them examine their belief. If they are forced to do some philosophical inquiry, critical thinking, examine their life. Similarly, you can have other initiatives, not mentioned in the article, but you have to go beyond it. There are some initiatives in the Indian context like MAWA. This is also from Indian context, although Men Against Violence and Abuse, MAWA. And in the college campuses, workshops on gender sensitivity are conducted again in it. And the students, they are encouraged to do critical analysis of media portrayals of girls and women. They must, they are encouraged to question social expectations regarding the men's behavior and masculinity so that the students can examine their attitudes and their beliefs. So these kind of activities that encourages the examination of life will check on the belief of people. And if thoughts and belief are corrected, much of the job is done regarding behavior. The information that you get also has a bearing on the knowledge that you develop, because knowledge comes from the sum total of information by the coherence of information, and the applicability of information, that's knowledge, but it begins in information. And according to Plato, soul has a soul. Our soul has a longing to know, according to Plato. We have a natural tendency to have information. So, whatever comes in our social media feed, anything and everything we try to pick up. It is so important to give the right information, because we have inclination to assume things, because that is our propensity to know things. We read and we remember, we have memory, and we try to pick things up as we see and read and hear. Most of the time, without even questioning it. We act like a sponge for information, albeit not for knowledge. But of information, we are sponges. It is our natural drive. But there has to be some amount of awareness as to how to seek information, some media literacy, where to get the information from. Go have some field visits, grassroots exposure. Formal education can also help in seeking information. Sometimes information may not come to us, so we have to go to the source of information. So maybe field visits are required, but sometimes information is coming to us. But all sort of information is coming to us. So we need to do some filtration in the process of getting information. And some amount of media literacy, some amount of objectivity, some amount of questioning, some amount of fact-checking, cross-examination is required. We have to be conscious when we seek and consume information. Otherwise, our cognition is going to get corrupted. And the right information concerning masculinity and the expected human behavior must come from certain things like gender sensitivity curriculum, school counseling programs, youth-focused applications, educational gamings, social media campaigns, some comic books, web series, youth theater, maybe music or rap workshops, and the podcasts, which are gaining popularity, already are very popular actually. Some of the shows like Amir Khan's Satya Mein Jayate, that used to highlight important social issues, also the gender-related issues. These can help people absorb information. And when they get information, they can actually collate it, connect it, find harmony in them, synthesize them, develop coherence to have knowledge on those issues. There are many characteristics of knowledge. The chief characteristic of knowledge is coherence. When you know one thing, you also know the relation of that thing with the other thing that you already know. And when things develop in harmony with each other, one strengthens and supports other, one explains the others, that idea is called as coherence. That is coherence. So when you have information, you have to do some reasoning on this, according to Plato. You have to reason things and connect things up. That converts into knowledge. Knowledge has an effect of getting enforced. Information may not move us that much, as much knowledge moves us. When we know many things in connections, in coherence, then that actually moves us more than information. And that has an effect of development of moral character, which becomes very strong. Otherwise, we may have information, we know things. Knowing does not translate into doing necessarily. If that knowing is information, that knowing is not knowledge. But knowledge moves us. According to Plato, knowledge is equal to virtue. Sorry, according to Plato as well, but that initially was a Socratic equation. But Plato has, in the first half of his philosophical writing, Plato is just Socrates made good. So it was original idea of Socrates, but that's also the idea of initially of Plato as well. Knowledge is equal to virtue. And virtue is action. Virtue is action. Knowledge takes us towards action. Correct? So knowledge moves us. It moves us because it has a force of coherence of all the information we hold. So it moves us. Now, in terms of psychology, we also get moved very strongly by our role models. And when we learn something from our role model, it is equivalent to having information in a coherent manner. That means to have knowledge. If you read something in newspaper, you might not be moved so much. But if your father tells you something, if your role model tells you something, you'll be moved. And information coming from those sources are almost having the force, mechanical force on you to bring you towards action. So information coming from role models, they have the same effect as knowledge has. And that is also one part that article discusses. Change also becomes possible when men and boys have positive role models demonstrating equitable behaviors. These initiatives underscores the importance of role models who actively participate in household and caregiving responsibilities, reject violence as a solution, practice empathy, and embrace vulnerability. And recently, you would know that Rahul Dravid, he took paternity leave to showcase his involvement in the fatherhood, to break the stereotypes about masculinity, and to demonstrate work-life balancing priorities. You can also write example of Vicky Kaushal, his domestic partnership with his wife. And these role modeling can have a lot of influence on the youth in change of behavior as if it has the same force as knowledge has on men. So that's the fourth aspect of cognition. The fifth and sixth aspect could be experience and wisdom. As I've told you, experience is necessary to have completion of understanding and hence completion of the process of seeking knowledge. And hands-on problem-solving activity is one thing that gives us experience. Traveling can also give rural immersion, getting immersed in some kind of ecosystem, a rural ecosystem or tribal ecosystem also gives us a lot of experience. But hands-on problem-solving activities, it also gives us experience. And the article discusses one such activity, gender equity movements in school, a collaboration between ICRW and the Department of Education in the state of Rajasthan. It uses interactive classroom activities to help adolescent boys see the harm in toxic masculinity. I don't know how far you agree with this phrase, toxic masculinity, and adopt more equitable gender attitudes. In one session, a boy reflected, it is written in the article, I used to think boys should only do outdoor chores. Now I believe we should work alongside women at home. That's the observation of the implementers of the scheme. There's another initiative mentioned in the article, Dekh Rekh, Hamari Shadi. These are activities in which the boys are engaged to have the experience of taking responsibilities, and which is quintessential, which is a very, very important part. Plato has said, emotion is the basis of all learning. And no matter how much you learn from the theoretical instructions, knowledge can never be complete without experience. And the sixth element in cognition is wisdom. Wisdom, as I've told you, is to look at the whole, look at the larger picture, is to rise up in the height of episteme knowledge and look at things from pole to pole. Have all the considerations of the consequences of next generation, of all the present stakeholders, and then decide what should be done. That is wisdom. And from the point of view of wisdom, requirement is, in the case of development of attitude for gender sensitivity, there are certain requirements from the point of view of wisdom. Balance tradition with progress. Consideration should be very broad. Harmonize gender roles. Unite strength with sensitivity. Combine rights with responsibilities. When you have a larger vision, when you look from the top, that is wisdom. Transformative insights, moving beyond stereotypes, seeing humanity beyond gender. understanding shared aspirations, recognizing mutual growth. When you see more than what is visible, when you see as if you're from at the top of the hill and everything is visible to you, you can see beyond what is shown to you, stereotyping, gender roles, that is wisdom. Ratan Tata, he was a very wise man, and his leadership style ensured the gender balance at the workplace gradually. And adopting such model of wisdom at the workplace will help change the attitude of the boys. So to deal with these problems, as the questions do identify laws are not enough, behavior come from attitude. To change the attitude, we have to change the cognitive part as well. So we dealt with one part of attitude, cognitive component, and we have seen in how the six things can be changed. When the question goes from this topic to the other topic of child marriage or the other topics of child labor, change of attitude will come much from the same idea. Change the thought, change belief, bring information, bring knowledge, develop experience, develop wisdom. That would change your cognition. And that would change about the attitude and hence the behavior. That completes our discussion on the second topic. There is a news article that reads like this, the title, RTI's purpose not to satisfy curiosity. Delhi University tells High Court over Modi's degree row. There have been instances in which the Chief Information Commissioner, they have also come out in public and said that RTI is misused. And not once, not twice, thrice. The question in the paper, our ethics paper, has been asked on this particular issue, on the usage of RTI. If you see this case study from 2019, what measure would you suggest to separate genuine and non-genuine applications? So RTI could be frivolous. RTI queries can also be filed because of the feeling of vindictiveness. You want to take on some civil servants and you're looking for some material. It could be also to hold them for ransom and seek money from them because they might have done some mistake that you want to identify and now you're blackmailing them. For various purposes, RTI can be used. RTI queries can be genuine, it can be non-genuine. The question was asking how you ought to separate genuine and non-genuine. See, because of paucity of time, I will not discuss this. But I will give you the answer and I'll do a broad overall discussion. How possibly genuine and non-genuine RTI files queries can be separated, it's here. But you see, if you read other questions in the exam, one of the questions asked how RTI has empowered citizens and how RTI has redefined accountability. And RTI as a tool has really redefined accountability because previously we did not have any avenues to ask questions to the politicians and to the civil servants. There was no avenue. Media could ask sometime if they agree to give interviews, the courts and the regulators like CAG, they could ask. But apart from casting our vote, we had no way to ask questions when they are voted to power. There's no platform. RTI has redefined it, although some people do misuse it. And although there could be some downslide of the application of RTI, but the powers of citizens under RTI must not be curtailed. And if you start to have any mechanism of separating genuine from non-genuine, then in that case, who will have the authority to decide whether the RTI you have filed is genuine or not genuine? Again, a government civil servant. The power that has been given by RTI from the sovereign to the citizens will be taken back. And that must be resisted. And we have to look for other ways to improve the functioning of RTI. And that's how I have concluded. Deprioritizing reform and focusing on containment is not the solution. Accountability should not burden the conscientious people who are using RTI in good faith. But since the question was asked, and the question also asked the merit and demerit of it, anything that you do to attempt to separate genuine from non-genuine, it will have merits, but it will also have demerits. See, anything that the government does, anything it does, will have some demerits. The mining activity that we talked about has some demerits. Whatever you do in any program, in any implementation, there will be some inclusion error, there will be some exclusion error in any program. It happens in Manrega, it happens in National Food Security Act, तो क्या? So you will not remove it. You will not stop implementation of it. You will not take away the rights of the people under those schemes. But similarly, this idea of controlling the RTI queries, and in some ways that must be resisted. So I've given many ideas, each has its merit, but each also has been given as demerits. But some of the ideas that having rate limiters, for example, not allowing anybody to file too many RTA queries, whatever a rational number is, maybe 20, maybe 30, maybe 40, whatever the rational number is that a person can file these many RTIs per month, that can be used as a tool to avoid the surge in RTI queries without curtailing the meaningful rights that the citizens have. All right, in case you have any question, you can post that in the comment section. I'll find out time to answer them. Goodbye, take care.